Lauren, welcome. I am so excited to have you here. And I feel like, I consider you a friend. I consider you a colleague. We go way back. I mean, your dad has been my therapist. He's mentored me. Your mom has been my coach. We've talked about
Yeah.
growing our businesses
Yeah.
and been on retreats together,
Yeah.
and I just feel like it's like homecoming time,
Yeah.
having you on here.
Aw, I feel the same. It is so sweet. And it's just so fun to watch you grow and helping all these moms of teens and tweens. And you started it before I even had kids. So it's kind of wild that now I have my own teens and tweens. So it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk about what you've built. Oh my gosh. I introduced you a little bit before we jumped on here, but just your therapy practices just are booming. And now you've come out with a new book, and it's going to be, by the time we go live with this, it's going to be in print. So they're going to be able to get
Yeah.
it. And I'm super excited, but
Yeah.
I printed it out.
Oh,
So
fun. There it
yeah,
is.
and you've got it there. So not
Yeah.
all of our
Yeah.
our listeners can't see it, but
Yep.
I love it. I love the cover. She's not crazy. Okay, moms, who feels crazy?
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, dare to understand your feminine power for true freedom, success, and influence.
Yep. That's
Wow.
right.
Yeah. So what led you to write this book?
I think like so many people, I've always dreamed of writing a book, but I never knew what would be the topic that really grabbed me. Um, and I feel like this was really powerful because, as I've grown as a mother, but as in an entrepreneurial world, I've really like studied all kinds of power and influence and all that kind of stuff. And I've noticed that, there's so much masculine power that is celebrated and studied and like assertion and being direct and being, concise and having vision and drive and physical strength and all those things. And they're beautiful. Like this is not a man bashing kind of thing, but the feminine gifts, the feminine power, how to lead, how to grow, in our home as women, we're leaders. We influence our families. Set the tone for the home. And you know, and there's so much in the entrepreneurial and in the business world as well, or whatever women are working on. I think influence is kind of at the crux of everything. And there's so much feminine value in the feminine side of power that just in my opinion, and when I've been doing research, there wasn't enough out there. And so as I kind of developed myself, one of the things I really wanted to do was I wanted to be as influential and successful as possible, but I didn't want to do it like a man. I wanted to do it as a woman and in engaging both sides, my masculine power and my feminine power. So I really believe that we all have this already within us. But I think as women, we often overlook and almost undervalue what we think of feminine power. We kind of dismiss it or play it down. And a lot of times, and the reason it's kind of a, cheeky, silly title, she's not crazy, but so often, I would catch myself being like, oh, I just feel crazy. And when I really dug into it, I realized that underneath the crazy, there's so much feminine power and value. It's just having to understand it and harness it in a way so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, or we don't just kind of write ourselves off as silly or crazy, or I'm just me. So this is kind of my hope, is that it's for women and men, but just that we see more balance and power, but really especially the emphasis on the feminine side, because it's just not celebrated enough. And it makes a difference in the home, it makes a difference at work. And I really think our world kind of needs more balance in how we have power. So that's kind of it.
I love having this conversation. I was telling you, I've never had anybody on the podcast that has ever talked about this.
Oh,
And I just want to pause on leaders in the family,
yeah.
because I think that, I don't know, maybe I'll date myself, but we think, oh, the man's the leader,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he's the
Yeah.
leader. And I
Yeah.
remember one time somebody saying to me, I was looking to my husband to do something, and I was like really frustrated that he wasn't doing it. And they said to me, you can lead in that area.
Yes.
And I was like, that's an area that you are strong in, that you need to lead. And I was like, what? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
isn't he supposed to do that?
Totally.
But I
Yeah.
was like, really? And it got me thinking about that, like you're talking about feminine power. So
Yeah.
when you think about the difference between feminine power and masculine power, can you speak to that a little bit? Like, what's the
Absolutely.
difference?
Absolutely. And I mean, and this is sort of like a matter of my opinion, but when we look at masculine power, and I love what you're saying too about your husband and you, that's really the whole idea is the balance, right? So there's areas that the masculine power is essential and it's beautiful and it leads, but then there leaves room for there are areas and there's times where the feminine power can lead and be beautiful. So when the at the very crux of everything, when you look at masculine power and feminine power, if you look at even just like physical intimacy, like how is a baby created? How does a man is assertive. He drives forward and a woman receives. A woman has to open herself and receive. And that takes a lot of strength and courage and vulnerability. You have to surrender in a way. And I think sometimes we look at that as like submissive or as less powerful, but it's actually very, very powerful. There's so many areas where another thing about women is like it's creating space, holding space. Our physical bodies are the epicenter of creation. We hold two cells together and in 9 months' time, give way. We create space, we protect, we nourish the baby, and then we give way and birth new life. And whether you've had a baby, whether however gender you are, whatever you feel or whatever you're born with, this is even for men too, at the crux of women's feminine power is receiving and giving birth to new life, where we can do that for
Mm.
ourselves. We can give birth to ourselves. We can give birth to new ideas. We can give birth to our children's dreams. Like there's so many ways. And it is very, very powerful when we have used someone who listens. It's a receiving kind of power, listening, absorbing, being with someone, sitting with them while they're in their pain, and not like
Mhm.
masculine power will be offering solutions, right? A feminine power says, I can hold your hand while you cry and cry with you. I can sit with you and allow you to figure this out on your own and believe in your strength that you have. I don't need to fix it. So those are again, it's not right or wrong, but I think that we sometimes look at that as submissive or that we're not the leaders, but
Mm.
women truly, we lead the tone of our home. Think of any morning with your family bustling around. If mom's in a bad mood, it ripples through the whole family, and that could be said of anybody, but there is something very quintessential to women's setting the tone of the home and setting the tone for the growth in the home and all of that kind of stuff. So I think when we look at the masculine versus feminine, we just don't I don't think, and I myself kind of didn't look at it as strong, as fiercely strong as it is to be able to receiving compliment, receiving love. It takes strength receiving, even in the intimate setting, receiving it creates you have to be so strong and trust your own strength to be vulnerable and to surrender and to be just still and quiet. Like there's so many things like that. I just love the idea of women harnessing it and expressing emotions too. One of the things I started off the book, I'm like, have you ever been like pouring your heart out or crying or really emotion? And then someone asks you, are you getting your period? And it's like, oh my God, it makes you so crazy. It makes me crazy. Like it makes me feel so upset. And why crazy, I mean upset because you're like, no, I feel this way and you might be right, which is the most infuriating of it all. But like I always say, like, it's not, it's like, but we're not crazy. It's not to be discounted what we say. Yeah, we have feelings, but it's like embracing our emotions and embracing, our ideas and our feelings. All of that is a very, very powerful tool for us to tap into rather than be like, crap. they're right. I am getting my period and I must not have meant what I said. No, both can be true. You can mean what you're saying and you can be hormonal or you could be going through menopause or whatever it is. Both can be true at the same time. I think hormones are more like a microphone. Something bothers you on any other given day, you might like it might you might say something, but then on when your hormones are kind of kicking into gear, it's like saying that same thing, but it's into a microphone, much louder,
Yeah.
draws more attention to it for yourself and other people. But yeah, but just looking at it is not something to be embarrassed of or diminish your, or I've done that before where I'm like, God, you wake up the next day and you're kind of like, did I mean that? I did get my period. Like maybe I was just too silly. It's like, no, I can mean it and you can still go back and repair and say maybe that came across too harshly, but both can be true.
Yeah. Gosh, I love the part about how the feminine power being receiving, and you have to be brave. It
Yes.
does take it. You do have to
Yes.
be brave. You do have to surrender,
Yep.
and that can
Yep.
feel weak.
Yes.
And so you're shifting our mindset around how we view it. So
Yeah.
I wasn't originally going to ask this, but I have to
Yeah.
ask, how do we get in the way of embracing our feminine power? Because I have a thought, but I want to hear what
Yeah.
you have to say.
I think when I look at it, I think one of the things is just that we haven't studied it enough and we haven't celebrated it enough and understood it. So, in my own life, when there's been times where I feel like very emotional or, my kids will tease me, oh, mom's crying at a commercial. And I kind of feel silly or weak or, and I realized I think part of it is owning it and seeing that as a power. Like, actually, this is great. My kids are seeing me feel. My kids are seeing that something on TV, even if it's a commercial or like a quick, oh my gosh, the Instagram reels that I'll watch. I'm like, oh, especially on the dogs. I'm like, they're so cute. They'll get me crying. And it's like I can show them that like I can be brave and strong and cry. And even if no one is crying with me, I can hold my emotions and it's a beautiful thing. It's not an embarrassing thing. So I think we often, I mean, there's probably many, many ways, and it's probably unique to each human, but I think a lot of times we just dismiss ourselves. We dismiss the things that actually are hidden powers and we kind of feel we play them down or we feel silly or we just don't even look at it that way. I think a lot of it's just perspective.
Yeah. That we don't, yeah, that we don't, we feel like we have to apologize is
Yes.
like we're
Yes.
feeling emotional
Yes.
and, oh, too sensitive. Like I heard
Yes.
that, a lot. You're
Yes.
too sensitive
Yeah. Yeah.
versus, I can feel, and that's a beautiful part of who I am.
Yes.
And that's a strength.
Yeah.
And I know a
Yep.
lot of moms are very comforted by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you chose to call it uh she's not crazy.
Yeah.
So how are you crazy? Like
Oh
how
my
do you
gosh.
feel
How am I
crazy?
not? How am I not? Oh my gosh. I think it's funny. My kids will always be like, Mom, you're so like all over the place. And I said, you know what? I'm passionate. And so I started saying, I'm not crazy, I'm passionate. And I said, that's the price of passion. Now, not everybody, I do have a personality. And I said, I always describe feelings like you're on a swing. So when you go forward, you feel so good. Your feet are going to the sky and they feel like you're touching the clouds. And then you go backwards, but backwards, it's a little scary. It's like a little unnerving. You don't really necessarily know what's behind you. And like, so in the analogy of feelings, the degree that you go forward is I think of it's kind of like the joy, the bliss, the excitement, the laughter. And then the backwards is the sadness, the fear, anxiety, the all of those feelings that we tend to not want to feel. I do believe all feelings are good. I don't have good and bad, but there are ones that we tend to want to experience. There's ones we tend to not want to. And to the degree that you swing backwards is the degree you swing forwards. So if you swing a little bit backwards, you swing a little bit forwards. And if you swing really, you push really far and you go really far backwards, that's when you get up to the top, where you can either like flip off, which is always what I did when I was a kid, or you just like, see your feet and you feel like you're touching the sky. So one thing I notice is like so many people when I work with people and the clients and so many people are so afraid to go backwards that they're just
Uh-huh.
sitting on the swing and they're going, why am I not going forward? Why am I not feeling that joy, the aliveness, the excitement, the passion, all of that? And they just want to go forward, but you can't. Swings don't work like that, and neither do feelings. And so when I explain to my kids, I'm like, I'm not crazy. I'm passionate. So it means I swing far back and I swing far forward. So when I'm happy, I'm really excited and happy and I laugh. And when I watch something that makes my heart tug, I cry. And then when I get upset, I get really upset. I feel very scared. I feel very angry. So and I do believe in balance. Like I try not to just, unleash hell when I'm in a bad mood, but I do feel things deeply. And so when I started shifting that for my kids, and then I say to my kids, I'm like, but I like that about myself because I like going forward. I like that. And not everybody needs to swing that far. That's up to each and every human on the planet to decide what they want to do. But I will say this, I think when we call it crazy, it feels like there's something wrong with us. And I have
Mhm.
felt that way. I mean, I feel crazy all the time. It's why I named the book that. I mean, this book is for everyone, but this book is for myself too. I'm doing my own work through the book. And it's like when we call it crazy though, it just diminishes the power. It diminishes the beautiful gifts. And when I called it passionate, I'm like, oh, this is just the price of passion to the point where my kids are like, just the price of passion. They think it's so annoying. But it's me talking to me. I'm actually not even talking to them. I'm talking to me because I am like, I'm not going to feel embarrassed or silly or diminish it like in saying, I'm just crazy. Oh, mom's just
Mhm.
crazy. Like, no, mom's just having a day. Mom's having her
Mhm.
feelings, but mom's also got a big heart and that can listen to you when you're having a day because I know what it feels like. So I think it's just reframing it all and kind of moving away from, we're all busy. Every one of us, I think we are all busy and we all get fried and we all have ways that we love our families. We love the people in our life and we put ourselves second. We put ourselves last and then we have very little to give. And so that's been another kind of piece of it for me too, is like, how do we set ourselves up so
Mhm.
that we are able to give our best, but also not just in the deficit of our own mental wellness, we giving from our best self.
Yeah. Gosh, you said so many good things. I've been taking notes
I told you I'm
because,
passionate.
yeah, I love holding it like I'm passionate and there's a deadness. And you and I know,
Yeah,
we've been trained this way where if you shut one emotion down, you shut them all down.
yeah,
And I know that certainly was true for me. I
yeah,
didn't want to feel my anger. I didn't want to feel my grief and sadness. And so I shut it down. But then once I started feeling it, and I see this, and I know you do too, you see
yeah,
this all the time in your practice, when you really start coming alive, when you
yeah,
let yourself feel those emotions.
yep,
And I have somebody that's actually on my Moms of Tweens and Teens team. And so she's been working on her feelings and emotions. And she said, oh my gosh, now I'm laughing more than
yeah,
I've ever
yeah,
laughed.
yeah,
But we're scared to go there. We
yeah,
hold
absolutely.
ourselves back. Like
Yeah,
I'll start feeling something and then it's like, oh, I don't want to feel that. So
yeah,
then we pop back up. But
yeah,
really, we need to give space to those feelings
yeah,
and they need
absolutely.
attention.
Yep,
And yeah, so what I
absolutely.
hear you is this aliveness, like you want to be fully alive. And do you think that's part of the reason that you've been able to be as successful as you are? Because how many therapists do you now have and how many practices have you opened in Chicago?
We've got 4. We're opening Evanston like any month now. Um, so I think we're probably around 70 therapists and we have 2 nurse practitioners that do medication. So, in growing. I mean, I probably am north of that number, but yeah, we are busy. We got a lot going on. And I think, yeah, I do think the aliveness and the passion help fuel a lot. And it also can be what gets in my way too. I am my own best, you know, like my best asset and I'm my worst asset. So it's like for me, not letting, when I get discouraged and when I get upset or when I feel down, not letting it completely consume me, because I can kind of just want to hide or go away. And I think I love what you were saying with the swing, because I think that about the feelings that you were saying, that we're all
Mhm.
feel scared to feel the grief or the sadness, and I do too. Um, and I think not every day we swing full swing. That's the thing I like about the swing is, like, if you're sitting and you feel kind of dead, part of it is just feeling a little. Maybe no one starts off the swing unless someone gives you an underdog, which is fun, but that's just not really like life. You start off by swinging back a little and you swing forward a little. And then as you get comfortable, you can go a little bit more. And then if you feel like you're going too far and you want to slow it down, you can kind of slow down the pace, but you pump a little slower. So not every day is a full swing, but I think it is the idea of like that. I wouldn't trade all of the dark, hard feelings that I don't enjoy. I wouldn't trade them, because then the price of feeling alive and happy, and like when I laugh hard. And when when I cry. It's like, and when I'm having fun, I feel very engaged, um and I'm able to get a lot done, and I'm able to like touch a lot of people. And that, I think, is the upside of the aliveness. And I think when we call it crazy, I think when we say, "Oh, you're just crazy," or "You're being crazy," it keeps us sitting on that swing. It deadens us, because no one wants to be called crazy. No one wants to think that about themselves. So if we can look at it as like, "Oh, I'm a woman and I'm embracing feminine gifts. I'm embracing my feminine power and influence. I'm influencing my family. I'm influencing the people I work with and the people stand in line at Target with." You can influence people around you, um, and I think when you embrace that you have that power, versus just saying, "Oh God, I'm crazy," or I'm just too much," or "I'm too this," or "I'm not enough," and all those things, that keeps us sitting on a swing, scared to feel anything, and then we're just numb. And I think I just have seen for myself and for people I work with, when you allow yourself to feel and live, it's just, life is so much sweeter, and you have more to give to the people around you.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And this might be new for our listeners, talking about feelings in this way, because I certainly know it was for me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what do you do with them? But
Yeah.
you have a map that you use in your book. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah.
How to just nurture your feminine
Yeah.
power and to find your passions. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, I put the book into 3 different kind of categories. So there's chapters in each category, and then the first one is about relationships. The other one is about success, and then the third one is about, oh my gosh, now I have to look and remember what it is. Life. So, oh no, sorry, vulnerability, relationships, and life. And
Okay.
so each of these chapters, I kind of give steps and ideas and a lot of vulnerable stories and examples from people, um, about what that looks like. And being vulnerable is kind of the first step. Brene Brown is like, everyone's hero and mine especially. But showing that vulnerability is a feminine thing. You're opening. You're, again, it's like a receiving. It's you're have to stand in your own strength to be vulnerable. And that is really the key that unlocks so many of the other powers. So then again, throughout the thing, then we talk about relationships and how do we bring our feminine power to relationships. So that's kind of the second piece of the map, if you will. There's actually no real map. And now I'm thinking maybe I should have one, but it's kind of a metaphorical one. And then the last one is life. Like, how do we bring all of this together for our own life, for our own influence, for how we want to have success and how we want to live, on this planet with our short, sweet time that we have.
Mm. That you start with vulnerability is so good, because I think that's the connection with the feelings,
Yeah.
and the feminine power and feelings are vulnerable. It
Yeah.
does take courage
Yes.
and vulnerability, and then to figure out, like, how can I, and that's the heart of connection.
Right. Exactly.
We can be on the surface all day
Yeah.
long, but if I'm not saying to you, when you said that, I felt hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
then I'm going to hold a grudge,
Yeah.
and, and then I'm going to build my case, and I'm not going to,
Yeah.
if I don't tell you, and then before you
Yeah.
know it, I mean, I just think of all the relationships before I learned this, that I was kind of like, see ya. You
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, I'm gonna take my toys out of the sandbox and go home. Being vulnerable is engaging. And there's a way that we can do that in a very feminine, beautiful way, where it's like masculine way of doing it. And sometimes that's needed too, but the masculine way is like, you're out of line, you did this and this, and da da da. The vulnerable, feminine way of doing it can be kind and gentle, but still honest and strong and bold. Like, when you said that, I kind of felt like you were putting me down, or I kind of felt silly and stupid when you said that, or you invited these people to lunch and I noticed I didn't make the list, and I'm sure it wasn't meant to be. You didn't do anything illegal. You didn't do anything wrong. You can have lunch with whoever you want, but I have to tell you, like, it for me, it felt really sad to not be there. And when I saw that post on it, Facebook or Instagram, I just thought, "Oh, like, why not me?" And I just wanted to share that with you. You don't have to explain it, but I just want you to know that. So, like, when we start talking like that with each other, we can be gentle, we don't have to say, "You did something wrong," or "Your kid did something wrong to my kid." There's a
Hmm.
way in which we can honor our feelings and honor our experience and still extend grace, and say, you probably didn't think of this way, or I'm sure you didn't wake up and say, how can I hurt her feelings today? Or, we can extend grace, but also like let people know where we're at. And that's where you start seeing, is this a person that I can vulnerably trust, and can our relationship develop? And when you find those people, it's golden, because then they'll tell you if you misstep. Otherwise, the relationship is just doomed to end. And
Yeah.
it's going
Hmm.
to inevitably lead with you or someone else emotionally shutting down or just drifting, and sometimes that's the right move for a relationship, but I think there's so many that that's not necessary. You could have so much more fun and connection, but it takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot
Yeah.
of bravery
Yes.
to be that vulnerable.
Yeah. And you're saying, I'm telling you this because you really matter to me.
Yeah.
It's really the essence of it.
Yep.
And, letting them know how you feel. And it does. It takes a lot of courage. And, being a psychotherapist and working, you work so much with moms and also with teens, with adolescents. It models it for our kids.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so then they learn how to do it
Absolutely.
and be able to have those healthier relationships
Yeah.
and in their
I always,
lives.
I always say your kids are not listening to us, they're watching us,
Mm.
we give such great advice to our kids, and I know I'm guilty of it myself. Like, my daughter will have a little, scuffle with a friend, and I'm like, "Oh, you should blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Do I do that?" Like, and so I've really challenged myself to be like, if I want to give advice to my kids, I have to pull the rule that I gave myself, that it has to be pulled from an example of a time that I did that. So
Mm.
here's what happened with me and my friend, like, and I'll tell my kids, like, here's something I'm going through right now, whether it's with, you know, a friend or a colleague or at work or stress that I feel. And I say, and here's what I'm doing, and let them actually give me advice. Like, it's really cool. You start building a bridge rather than becoming a candy dispenser of advice that we don't take ourselves, and you get so much more credibility. So if I want to say something, well, you should just tell her that you're blah 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 blah. I think to myself, have I ever done that? If I have, then I tell her about it, and then I tell her how it went. Did it go good or did it go bad? Then, but if I have something I want to tell my kids that I am not living or haven't tried myself, then I'm missing out on the fun too. And they don't, they see through that. So they're listening to you a little, but they're really watching you. Like, how do you handle it? How do you handle things that you're stressed out with, and challenges that you're facing in your life?
Yeah, I love the candy analogy. I'm thinking, and they usually don't want that candy.
No, they
As much
don't.
as they might like that, like candy, they're
Mm-mm.
not going to like our candy.
I
So
know. So
when
true.
we want to give, advice,
Yeah.
and they don't want it. They,
Mm.
it usually falls on deaf ears and doesn't work,
Yeah.
especially when you're tweens and teens.
Oh my gosh. And in fact, I used to, I worked a lot with parents around this. I would have a mom come in and say, oh, my daughter is dating this guy and he is just bad news and all this stuff. And I'm listening and I'm going, oh yeah, he is bad news. And she's like, I just been telling her, like, I'm trying to show her all these things, these red flags and this and this and this. And she's, whatever. And I said, listen, here's how it is in the mind of an adolescent. Their job is to detach from you. Their job is to become an adult and go fly off, and their peers become more important. So anything they say trumps you. Their 13-year-old advice trumps yours. You're like, "Oh my gosh, like crazy." And it is. But I said, if you really want to make a connection with your kid and you want to make a point, one, tell a story from your own life. But two, I said, think of it a little bit like the opposite game. So you say go left, it's not because they're defiant and it's not because they're jerks or they're terrible. Their brain is wired and it's a beautiful thing. It's what it's meant to do. Their brain is wired to go right. You say left, they go right. So I said, if you want her to get married to this guy, keep driving the point home that he's a bad guy. If you want her to go to prom with him, you keep it up. You're on the path. So if you want her to see what you see in him, take a step back. And if she complains about him, just listen or just say, well, and I said, this is radical. And I know this sounds weird, but you could almost take the opposite thing and say, I don't know, I'm sure he didn't mean to kiss your best friend. Maybe it was just a mistake. I mean, and that's a little bit out there, but it's just like, but don't buy into it, like, oh my gosh, I told you he's such a bad guy and blah, 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 blah. You want to kind of just take a step back and realize that their brain is beautifully designed to reject your advice. So you got to come at it from a different angle because what they want to do is become an adult. So you start talking to them like an adult. What do we do with adults? We talk about our experiences. We talk with respect and believe that they can make a decision on their own. And if that doesn't even compute, then I just say, think about a time that you were talking to a friend or your husband or your partner, and you're like, something, is bothering you. And they're like, well, have you called? Did you try? You know what? You should do that. And you're like, oh God, it's so insulting. So you're like, yes, I know how to fix it. And I don't need you to do it. I definitely don't
Oh,
need you to
yeah.
tell me how to do it. I just want you to listen and confirm how frustrating this is. That's all I want you to do. And our kids are doing the same thing with us. The minute you start dispensing advice or nuggets of wisdom, you have lost the game with them in terms of winning. They're having your influence and having them trust you as a person to go to, because it diminishes. First, they're not going to listen to what you're saying because their brains are wired not to. Second, they're not going to see you as someone comforting to talk to. They're going to see, yeah, see, my mom doesn't get it. She just doesn't get it. You're a different generation. It was different for you. You guys didn't even have cell phones. You're old,
Yeah. It does. It backfires every time. And you can
Totally.
just see it in their body language.
Oh,
All of a sudden their head starts, if they're in the car, they're looking out the window. They're like
yep,
try to get away as
yep,
far as they can from
yep.
you.
And
And
the unfortunate thing is that what as mothers and as women, the advice we're giving is usually great. The
oh
problem is
yeah.
they're not going to take it. So it's like you got to kind of come at it at a different angle.
Yeah. Or even with, oh, what do you like about him? Like
Yeah.
get them to think about what they
Yes.
think.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Really.
Versus telling them what they should think or
Yep.
what they should say. I
Yep.
love it.
Gosh,
Yeah.
he reminds me of a boyfriend I had. Oh, didn't go well. Well, if you want to ask more about it, I'll tell you. Otherwise, I won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they'll usually say, no, I don't. I hate that. And then but then
Yep.
they, if you say, okay, they'll usually come around and say, well, what did happen?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. So
It,
we're
it's
not trying to stuff it down their throat.
yeah. No.
So you talk about, and I want you to, end on this note with just the importance of feminine power and boundaries, loving boundaries. And so how does that connect?
Yeah. So boundaries are the thing I would say I have struggled with the most in my relationship with myself and with others, because we're caring, right? And that's a beautiful thing and it's a wonderful thing, but we put others first. If there's someone needs something, we'll do it for them first and ourselves last. And the thing is that I really think that it's something important for us to harness as a feminine power is to set these loving boundaries, because when you're worn out and when you feel like run down, you're not doing anyone any favors. The times that I snap at my kids or say something or do something I regret is always when I feel I'm not taking good enough care of myself. I'm not setting boundaries. Like, can you get this? Can you make me a water bottle? Can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm like, like, and stop, and it's my problem because I didn't set the boundaries and I'm going to take care of myself. The way that I look at it is like, I always say, you cannot water the garden with an empty watering can. You have to put water
Mhm.
in the can. Otherwise, you're just kind of holding a dry can around. And I think so much of us, one of the most beautiful things about women is that we want to give, we want to help, we want to nurture. But in order to do that, we have to fill our own tanks. And so with boundaries, I kind of go through like some like hacks on how I have learned how to do it. Because when I hear boundaries, I think of someone being cold and hard and like rude, like, you know what? I'm sorry. You crossed my boundary. You can't do that. Or, no, I'm not going to be able to come to your event because I've got boundaries. And you're like, ugh, it just feels so yucky. And I think the real intent of boundaries is that it's loving and that it's loving to others, it's loving to yourself. And there's ways I have figured out with working with clients, but also doing it myself. Anything in this book, I've done myself. I've practiced myself. I've done myself. Um, so walking through like how do we set boundaries that are loving, and some of the like quick little tips that I have in the book and I go into further is just like, one is I work this out with my own therapist, is that I never say yes immediately, but that doesn't mean we have to say no immediately either. You can say, for okay, so someone invites you to their birthday dinner, that's very like, I'll respond, oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me, that sounds so fun, let me check my calendar, or let me check my kids calendar, my husband's, and get back to you. But like first is like genuine like excitement. It's not like, I don't know, I've got to check, I've been so tired, I'm run down. It's like we don't have to do it like that. You can be very kind and excitable about it. And then the second step I do is I do this thing I call a pretend no. So then when I'm reflecting, I say to myself, no, I'm not, and I just try it on. I just say in my head, no, I'm not going to that birthday dinner. And I think it through and I think of how I would say no and how I would do all this stuff. And then I sit and I think I notice how I feel. So do I feel relieved? Do I feel conflicted, guilty, anxious? These are signs that maybe that dinner is not for me, not this time. Um, but then when I say no, and in my head, and I really think it through, like this is how I'd say no. And I think if I feel kind of like, oh, you know what? I actually do want to go. I'd like to go because I wanted to ask, whatever. And you start and you can feel the yes kind of coming around. And then I walk through a couple other steps and I won't go through all now, but like of when you say no, how do you say no in a way that enhances your relationships, but also takes care of yourself? So there's a lot, no one likes being told no, but it's like, how do we say no in a way that, honors that person? Like, oh my gosh, so grateful you invited me to your birthday dinner. That is so nice. I unfortunately am not going to be able to make it this time, but please, I'd love to get together another time, or please keep me in mind for the next, something like that, where it's just basic, but it's still kind and authentic and genuine. This finding something true and real to you. I mean, don't not saying things you don't mean, but um, not just being like, no, and then you go through your laundry list of reasons why. No one likes that.
Mhm.
It doesn't feel good.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I'm thinking, I mean, that is just such a diamond in your book to be able to like unpack that alone. I'm
Yeah,
sitting here when you said the tired part, I can
yeah,
see that. I think I give that off sometimes to like people that are closer to me. It's
yeah,
like, I'm so tired.
yeah,
So don't
yeah,
ask me like,
yeah,
oh, I'm so busy. I'm so
yeah,
tired
yeah, yeah,
versus just having the boundary. Because if I'm tired and I'm exhausted, then maybe they won't be upset with my no.
yeah, absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
it's just interesting how you slowed that whole process
Yeah.
down. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, thank you, you know,
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
helps me like, oh, that's what's going on versus, no, I need to take care of myself.
Absolutely. Well, you know, the funny thing is that if you don't, this is the last part of the boundaries thing is if you don't set your own boundaries, your body will. And I said, when you're running thin, or this is how it is for me, and I've seen it with other people too, you get a migraine, you get sick, you get a virus, you get an ear infection, injure yourself. Like how often have we had a clumsy thing? You burn your hand on a curling iron, or you roll your ankle. I always say, like, listen, as some accidents happen and we're all going to get sick. It's not to make it bad, but what I do is I make it curious. I always go, whenever I get sick, I always go, huh, I wonder what this is about for me. Because I'm like, ooh. And one of the keys that I always say is like, if you're really struggling to say no to something and you start thinking almost a fantasy about getting the stomach flu, that is a good sign to just say no, because I've literally gotten the stomach flu when I couldn't say no, and I was 8 months pregnant, and it was a work deadline, and I really did not feel like I had the power to say no, and my body shut down, and I was vomiting all night, and I swear, yes, like, I'm not trying to say viruses and sicknesses aren't real, but there's an emotional component, like, just be curious when you do that, or if you're tired all the time, you're saying that, it's like then it's kind of like it's a less direct way, or I'm so busy, and we all say that, and I know, but like it's sort of a less direct way of saying I don't think I can commit to doing much more versus, just, oh, I would love to, but I right now just can't. and
Hmm.
and the biggest thing with boundaries when we say no, this is a big thing for me. Let your no be enough. You can be kind and let your know when you give the reasons why, it's generally really insulting. Like if I think about it, like we do it to be kind, right? But like when someone's like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for inviting me to your birthday dinner, but my daughter has band practice and I've got a driver," and you're like, "What?" Or I'm just so tired. And then you see him doing something the next day and you're like, "Wait a minute." Like usually, unless the excuse is like a wedding, a hurricane, a fire, or like something like very large, they're generally you're telling someone where they line up on your thing. Like, oh, I've got to, like the funny version is I'm gonna wash my hair. Like that's not real. But like when someone's like, oh, I've got a hair appointment, I can't move.
Ah,
You're like, what?
I
I'm less important than your hair appointment. I'm pretty sure they are flexible and you have enough time to make a difference. And it's like when you just it's okay to put your hair appointment over what your friend is asking you to do. But when we give all the excuses, it minimizes our power and just saying, I'm trusting myself, I'm trusting my boundaries. Say, it's not gonna work for me. You also invite them to help problem solve. So, oh, I can't come to your birthday dinner because I've got to drive carpool. Oh, my friend Peggy can drive. That's great. You can come. She'll drive your kids. Now what? Now what do you do? Because
yes,
gives
yes,
it
yes.
invites people to poke holes, and not because they're bad, and not because they're manipulative. It's just if you're throwing out problems and they throw out a solution, now what? Now you say, well, actually, I just don't want to come. Now,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
it's like, I think I'm coming down to something. It's like all of a sudden, it's like, so when we just let our no be enough, that's saying, like, I'm, trusting myself and, I'm sorry, it's just not going to work for me tonight, but I would love to see you. And I'm so honored you invited me. And oh, will you send me pictures? I'm going to have FOMO. I'm going to miss out. And that may all be true. You can say no, but you don't give a lot of detail. Like, oh, I have this really big orthodontist appointment for my kid. I just can't
Yeah.
move. It's like, feels terrible.
That is so good, Lauren. Like thinking about how we can do that. We just give so many excuses and
Oh,
it can be insulting and hurtful and we
yeah.
don't think about that.
No, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
So
just like, I'm just so tired. And you're like, but yeah, you went to lunch with someone else yesterday. So were you not tired then? It's like, it just kind of like, again, we don't mean to do it. We mean well, but it's honoring that feminine power saying, I have boundaries and I have to take care of myself. Whatever that looks like doesn't need to be privy to the person that you're saying no to. It's better for them too.
yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, so good. So tell everybody, because I have to get a copy of your book. It's going to
Oh,
be out
yeah.
by the time
Yes.
we broadcast this.
Yep.
Where do they find you? Where do they get your book
Yep.
and
Well,
connect with you?
it's really easy. The book will be on Amazon and Kindle. So I think you just go to Amazon, put in She's Not Crazy or my name, which is She's Not Crazy is way easier because my name is so long. And but yeah, and then you can order the Kindle version or paperback. They're pretty cheap. And I think and the other thing is all the proceeds go towards our nonprofit. So we have scholarships for people who can't if their insurance doesn't cover therapy, or we have people in need, we give scholarships. So all of it goes to our nonprofit, which is Inspire Change for Mental Health. So, even if you don't really like the book or you don't use it and you buy it, it's going towards a good cause. So hopefully that's enough to you know, whatever. But yeah, so
I
no,
love that you're doing that with the proceeds to your book.
yeah, yeah, it'll be
You're
fun.
amazing and you give
Aw,
back. So
yeah, I
thank
tried.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my
thank you,
gosh.
Lauren,
Well,
for
thank you
coming
so much.
on. Yeah, I just love having you on. We'll have to have you back because there's so many things. I mean, mom guilt came up for
Oh
me and
yeah. Oh
how
yeah.
you grow a successful business and you're a mom. I mean, so much,
Yeah.
but I wanted
Absolutely.
to get the word out about your book.
You.
And
That's so sweet.
I know that it's going to be super helpful to moms.
I hope so. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing too. I know you've got such a beautiful community of moms, and I think it's so cool that everyone's just trying to do their best and come together. I think women are better together. So you're rocking. Keep it up.
Yeah, thank you. We are better together for sure
Yep.
in our feminine power.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yay!